It's way down there. Get your arms out.
So what you might have seen there is some of the birds on top of the truck with the activity of the gate opening.
Oh, and there's a little tiny one right there. Oh, a super youngster.
Last week, you met our new friends, Ed and Ann, who have work camped at the Grand Canyon for the past 2 years. They gave us an insider's tour of the park, including a hike that you won't find in the park map. Shoshone Point Trail starts at an unmarked pullout along Desert View Drive. It is the only place in the park that can be reserved for private events. It is recommended that if the gate is open, then it is being used by a group and best to come back another day. The 1-mile walk along a dirt road takes you through a pine forest where we saw a number of wild horses, and then on to an improved picnic area with vault toilets. Beyond that is the point where we also watched a few men apparently competing to win a Darwin Award.
This is what you don't do in the Grand Canyon. This girl, have you ever seen Picacho Peak?
No, I'm just thinking anybody doing it.
It has chain rail,
Oh.
and you pulling yourself up, and these,
Okay.
and it's quite dangerous. And this girl's in ballet shoes,
Yeah.
flats, little ballet flats. It was weird. Wow. Shoshone Point. And it drops right off both sides. That's far enough, Anne. See the helicopter?
Oh, really? They going in the fan? Right where the trail is, Unless he's doing a search and rescue.
It's landing right there next to the trail. Zoom it all the way in.
Then it was back to Ed and Ann's, where we mooch-dogged for several nights. Our entertainment for the night was a visit from the numerous elk and deer that hang out in the area. Today is National Public Lands Day, and we're heading to Vermilion Cliffs National Monument. Public Lands Day is the largest single-day volunteer effort in the nation, with hundreds of thousands of volunteers working to restore and preserve public lands of all types. It is held on the 4th Saturday of September, and you can find an event near you on National Public Lands website. Today's event does not have us working, but rather celebrating the release of 5 more California condors raised in captivity. The 280,000-acre Vermilion Cliffs National Monument was established in 2000 and is home to one of the 5 areas where the California condor has been reintroduced. The monument is part of the Arizona Strip, which is land lying north of the Grand Canyon and Colorado River. It is one of the most remote and rugged public lands in the lower 48 states, which makes it ideal for the reintroduction of the California condor.
lenses here.
Yeah, there'll be some glass.
I'm sure no one, only fools use an iPhone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back in the early 70s, I was on a geology field trip in school, and we were in the Sespe area of, it's kind of just east of Santa Barbara, Ojai, that area. And I got to see one of the last wild condors. And it was shortly after that they decided to capture all the condors. I think they were down to like 13 in the wild, and they were going to capture them all and try this captive breeding program. At the time, I never thought I'd ever see a condor in the wild again. And so this is pretty exciting. This is the 27th year for the release of birds. The program has had great success. There are now 114 in the Southwest and 550 within the 5 different release areas, which include Southern and Central California, the Pacific Northwest, and a small population in Baja, Mexico.
Is there any way to look through with a...
Historically, these majestic birds, one of 23 vulture species in the world, range throughout much of North America, from western Canada to northern Mexico, from California to Florida. They have a wingspan of 9.5 feet and are the largest land bird in North America. By 1982, their population had plummeted to 23 birds. That's when biologists stepped in and captured every bird and began a captive breeding program. In 1992, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service began reintroducing them to the wild.
Wow. Wow.
This, I'm happy to say, was your best choice. Of all the events that you could have gone to today, this is by far your best choice. You're going to get an amazing wildlife viewing experience. Back in 1996, we had the very first condor release at this same site, and I had the privilege of being here then as a young wildlife biologist. But Bruce Babbitt at that time raised his hand and commanded that the condors fly, and they did. So very interesting and exciting and amazing day.
In the early 1980s. And on Easter Sunday, 1987, the last condor was captured from the wild and added to a captive population. So for all intents and purposes, the California condor was extinct in the wild. There were many theories and hypotheses as to why the birds had declined. Some said it was human encroachment. You know, there's that little town called Los Angeles just near the historic range where they were last found. And that, of course, that does play a role, but the beauty of what we've learned through reintroduction, made possible by captive breeding, taking a species from the wild and assuming that you can breed it in captivity, and then assuming you can reintroduce it to the landscape, is a tremendous hurdle. We had so many questions. And since 1992, when they first started releasing birds in Southern California with the Fish and Wildlife Service at the Hopper Mountain Complex there, then other partners had come on, like the Peregrine Fund. We started releases in 1996 here, as Mike mentioned. And every year we release 10 or 12, sometimes 13, sometimes fewer birds. The other good news is these birds did in fact breed in the wild. We had the first wild hatch chick, Condor 305, in 2003 in the Grand Canyon. And another pair that tried to breed in the Grand Canyon later produced young. Get this, as a testament of will they know what to do, the condors in the early years of the recovery program chose caves that were used by their ancestors in the Pleistocene, in the last ice age. That's an amazing feat, if you ask me. But since we started reintroducing birds here, they're heavily monitored. Every bird wears a patagial wing tag. You can take a look at those on the table back here and see those wing tags. What holds that wing tag in place that has a number on it, and each bird has its unique number, is a transmitter. This condor crew right here, as the many crews before them over the last quarter century, are out here 365 days a year, Christmas, Thanksgiving, you name it. They're out here tracking and monitoring these birds. And we're tracking and monitoring them so that we can learn what it takes for a condor to be successful today. In fact, these guys are going to be locked up on these spotting scopes here. We have a bunch of other people with scopes. You can come up and ask them questions, but once we announce that the birds are released and the door is open, well, it's actually the other way around. We have to open the door and then they come out on their own. So these birds are from captive breeding programs that have come from Los Angeles Zoo, which is really where it all began in captive breeding, the San Diego Wild Animal Park, who came on second, the Peregrine Fund, and our facility at the World Center for Birds of Prey, and then the Oregon Zoo. That's where all the birds are bred. Then, based on their genetic diversity, they place those birds in the different release sites. And combined with the 109 birds we have here today, soon to add 5 more for the release today, and then we have 5 more to follow that in a few weeks, maybe as long as a month, and then 2 more for this year. That is the collective recovery program: captive breeding, release, and monitoring. No, I'm happy to report today that there are over 500 birds. Anybody have the actual number? I don't have the actual. See, because it has all of these different release sites, it's hard to say on any one day, but over 500 birds, and there are more birds in the wild today than there are in captivity. Condors are slow to reproduce. They don't reproduce until they're about 8 years of age. So we have to first get them to that age. So these birds today are from the captive breeding facilities. They're about 1.5 years of age, and they'll have all of that time up until they pair with another and then choose a nesting location. And like I said, some of those nesting locations were used back in the Pleistocene, and then they start producing their own young. And then after 6 months in the nest, they would normally fledge. So this will be the first flight for these birds from captivity. They don't have the benefit of having been in a nest cave on a cliff face like this for 6 months before they leave the nest. This will be their first flight. So rather than having the benefit of being there that long, they have this condor team. So what they're going to do is keep eyes on the birds after they come out, hopefully a couple at a time and hopefully relatively soon, so you can see what you came here to see. But then they'll track these birds all the way until sundown. And what we want to make sure is that the birds find safe places to roost, because the second leading cause of death is predation. And coyotes do a really good job at taking advantage of young, ignorant condors that have yet to experience living out here in the wild. So that's what they're doing. So come up and ask them questions, especially now if you have questions, because once the birds are released, they're going to be pretty busy with that. Come find us at the booth there, and we can answer any questions you have.
When they say, oh, they just went over Shark's Tooth or anything, you'll know exactly where they're going.
Okay. Okay, Ed, what kind of lens? What kind of lens is that?
It's a 500 4.5 with a 2x converter, so it's about 1,000 millimeters.
Do you think my camera could look through the lens? Would you think I'd see anything?
You could try. Just go ahead. It's focused up in there. Yeah, you see where the lens is?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
On the top door first,
Somebody would
then the bottom door. Look at that, here we go.
So what you might have seen there is some of the birds on top of the trap with the activity of the gate opening. We open that gate remotely from
Here, baby.
Sounds like we have one out.
Look at the shadow they create on the rocks.
9A.
So the first bird to go out was 9A. The tag number is 9A.
Sorry, 5A.
All right, folks, well, enjoy yourselves. Thank you for coming to the 27th annual California Condor National Public Lands Day celebration.
How we doing, baby? Can I see?
Unfortunately, there are still a number of threats to the birds. 54% die due to lead poisoning. Much work has been done to get non-lead ammo in the hands of hunters. In California, micro-trash has been a problem. Birds will ingest the trash and then feed it to their chicks. Golden eagles are also known to attack the birds, and 2 years ago, the the Peregrine Fund posted a video on YouTube of a condor rescue. I'll post a link to that video in the description box. It is definitely worth watching. And finally, coyotes are a problem, especially to the newly released birds who've been raised without any understanding of predators. If you want a chance of seeing the birds closer up, then stop at Navajo Bridge. You may be lucky and capture a nesting pair in the cliffs above the river. Okay, Navajo Bridge, bring us a condor. Cool. Pedestrian use. So this is the old bridge. The Condor Release will certainly go down as a highlight of our summer. I learned so much about this amazing bird. The California condor is one of 23 vulture species in the world, and most of them are threatened. They will fly up to 120 miles in search of food. They can eat 2 to 3 pounds of meat in one sitting and then store it in their crop for later. They provide many ecosystem services, and we need to keep them around. I will put links in the description box if you care to donate to one of the many nonprofits that have done so much to save the condor and countless other birds. Welcome home to California.